Welcome to the deep dive. We're here to pull out the core ideas from your reading, and today we're getting into sambhog se samadhi ki or, which translates to from sex to samadhi.
That's right.
Our goal is really to explore the powerful connections presented in these discourses between our basic sexual energy and higher states of consciousness.
It's a really fascinating subject.
Yeah.
A deep dive into how something so fundamental connects to, spiritual goals.
Yeah.
Lots to unpack here.
And we're doing this deep dive especially for you, our learner listener, someone who wants knowledge quickly, but also thoroughly, who likes different angles and those aha moments, but without getting bogged down.
Exactly.
So let's just jump right in. The text starts by looking at sex as this primal energy, and crucially, how we seem to misunderstand it.
Yes, it sets it up straight away. Sex as the divine's creative spark, the basic life force wanting to continue itself. But what's really striking is how this core drive has gotten, tainted. The word itself, sex or kabai, it carries this negative weight, almost like it's something shameful.
Yeah, it's like we've taken this incredibly powerful natural part of ourselves and just covered it in judgment. The text uses a pretty good analogy, comparing it to electricity or atomic power.
That's a great point. Just like people might have initially feared electricity, its raw power, before we learned to harness it.
Right.
The text suggests we're kind of the same boat with sexual energy. We haven't maybe grasped how to understand it, how to transform it.
Which does make you think, doesn't it? Why is this drive so incredibly strong, so universal, even with all the societal pushback against talking about it openly or teaching it?
Exactly.
This pull, this force, it must point to something more, right?
That's definitely what the text implies.
Yeah.
That fundamental attraction isn't just about the physical act. It hints at a much deeper longing, something underneath it all.
So the first big idea is maybe we've unfairly demonized our core creative energy, like fearing electricity, and that's stopping us from seeing its potential.
Precisely. It suggests that core attraction isn't solely physical, but a sign of a deeper yearning worth exploring.
Okay, so that leads us nicely into the next part, which is about this feeling of separation, the illusion of it, and that deep desire for connection.
Yes. Love is defined here quite beautifully, I think, as the desire to reconnect when we feel broken or isolated. And the text suggests that the most intense feeling of this reconnection often happens in the sexual experience between people.
It's framed as this almost primal urge to merge, to get past feeling separate. And the text puts forward the idea that if we see this drive as like a thirst for unity, for love, it could maybe lead us somewhere completely different, towards another kind of connection.
That's the core idea, isn't it? That the sexual urge is fundamentally about overcoming that feeling of being alone, trying to reconnect to some kind of larger unity.
So a profound insight there.
Exactly. And the text even points to the incredible joy, even if it's fleeting, in that sexual union.
Right, that momentary bliss.
It suggests that this brief moment is maybe a glimpse, a little hint of the greater bliss of maybe an eternal union with the divine, or maybe just with everything. It really makes you pause and think about what that brief merging signifies about our deepest needs.
Okay, let's dig into that a bit more. How does the text link sex, the ego, and this path towards transcendence, towards samadhi?
Well, it argues that the ego is always looking for power, right?
Yeah.
Just like it might chase wealth or status. And from that ego perspective, love, especially that deep merging kind of connection, often looks like foolishness, like it's childish or irrational.
Yeah, that makes sense. The ego wants boundaries, wants to be distinct, so losing oneself in connection feels like a threat.
Totally. And there's an interesting observation about who focuses on spiritual things.
Oh.
It suggests that it's often those closer to the end of life, maybe when the ego's grip isn't quite so tight, who get more involved in religion or spirituality.
Ah, okay.
Whereas the energy of youth, it argues, is mostly aimed at, creation, at life itself.
That really reframes the whole spiritual journey idea. The text seems to say samadhi, enlightenment, isn't the enemy of sambhog, of embracing life and sexuality, but more like its transformation, its natural outcome. And this is where brahmacharya comes in.
Yes, and it gives a really nuanced take on brahmacharya, which often just gets translated as celibacy.
Right, but it's more complex.
The text suggests true brahmacharya isn't about forcing yourself to suppress sexual urges. It's more like living like the divine.
Yeah.
A state that arises naturally from deep inner experience and understanding, not from, just clamping down on things.
That's a huge difference. The text actually warns that suppression can cause mental problems, right? That it's not real brahmacharya.
Precisely. It says real freedom from sex, or maybe freedom through sex, comes from deeply understanding its nature through direct experience, not by fighting it.
Okay, so the takeaway is, spiritual growth isn't about denial. It's about understanding and transforming our fundamental energies.
Which then brings us to this really interesting idea, glimpses of samadhi, of that higher state, within the sexual experience itself.
How does that work?
Well, the text suggests we can actually have these brief moments of non-body consciousness during sexual union, like tiny flashes of transcendence.
Wow. Like forgetting yourself, your body, just for a second.
Something like that. A momentary dissolving of the usual sense of self. And it puts forward two main paths to higher consciousness.
Okay.
Sex and meditation. But interestingly, it calls sex the natural path, the one given to us by nature, available to everyone.
Now, the text also goes into the fallout, socially and personally, from repressing sex. This seems pretty significant for how we live together.
Oh, absolutely. It argues that condemning sex has actually damaged the foundation of society, the family unit.
How so?
It asks a really pointed question. How can we have real love in the world if the very root of that connection, this primal energy, is denied or seen as dirty?
That's powerful. And it uses the Khajuraho temples with those famous erotic carvings on the outside walls as an example.
Yes, and the interpretation is fascinating. Those sculptures aren't just about sensuality. They symbolize the fundamental life energies that you need to understand to integrate.
Before you can go inside.
Before you can enter the sacred inner part of the temple, exactly. It suggests you can't just bypass your own nature on the way to the divine. You have to grapple with it first.
So, understanding and integrating our primal side is actually foundational for spiritual growth.
That's the implication. And it definitely calls out the hypocrisy it sees in society.
In what way?
Noting that while sex is often condemned publicly, many people are obsessed with it.
Right.
And it points out that children aren't stupid. They quickly see the gap between what adults preach and what they actually practice.
And that disconnect
Breeds confusion, mistrust. It distorts how we understand both sex and spirituality. Undermines the very things society claims to value.
Okay, changing tack slightly. The text really stresses knowing where you stand right now. Understanding your starting point on this whole journey.
It uses an analogy for this, right? Yeah, the Calcutta and Bombay one. It's simple but effective. You can't map out your route to Calcutta if you don't even know you're in Bombay.
Makes sense.
Similarly, the text argues we are all fundamentally rooted in our sexuality, understanding that part of ourselves, our drives, desires, the whole thing is the essential first step if you want any kind of real spiritual growth.
So accepting where you are, not pretending.
Exactly. And it warns you not to be fooled by, just the outward signs of progress.
Like someone acting celibate.
Right. Outward celibacy or other forms of self-denial might not mean much without that deep inner understanding and transformation. External actions alone might not get you there.
Okay. Let's talk about love, marriage, and freedom. The text has some maybe unconventional views here.
It definitely does. It makes a pretty bold claim that real love flourishes in freedom.
Okay.
Whereas marriage, seen as a social structure for stability, can sometimes actually get in the way of genuine love developing.
So it challenges the idea that marriage automatically creates love.
Yes. It suggests that if the bond isn't based on free affection, if it feels forced, it might actually stop love from ever starting.
So the key idea is love needs freedom, genuine connection, not just structures.
That seems to be the gist. It really emphasizes individual choice and autonomy when it comes to the heart. Love is a free gift, not something society enforces.
The deep dive also gets into how much fear and social conditioning shape us, especially around sex and spirituality.
Oh, definitely. It argues we've been instilled with all these deep fears, fear of hell, sin, what other people think, and that this really holds us back from accepting ourselves, from honestly exploring who we are and what drives us.
It uses a story to illustrate this, right? The Emperor's Well.
Yes, where everyone drinks and goes mad, but they think the one person who didn't drink is the mad one.
Right.
It's a powerful illustration of how societal conditioning, that shared madness, can completely twist our view of reality.
And how we fear the crowd.
But the crowd is just made up of individuals, each with their own fears. It's this collective fear that creates a shared reality, which might be, totally illusory.
This all leads up to the text calling for a kind of revolution in consciousness. What does that look like?
Well, it's not just about tearing down the old ways. True revolution, it says, is about a new kind of individuality emerging, an internal shift, a real transformation from within.
So different from just rebelling against things.
Exactly. Rebellion might just destroy without building anything authentic. And it uses anger and sexual desire as examples again.
How so?
It says suppressing these natural instincts doesn't get rid of them. It just pushes them down, drives them inward.
Causing problems.
Leading to inner conflict and, ultimately contributing to problems in society. It uses that image of boats tied to the shore.
Yes.
People living their whole lives thinking they're sailing, but they're still tied up, not realizing they haven't actually gone anywhere.
Wow. So true change has to come from inside, not just fighting the outside.
That's the core message there. And it also warns against, just blindly following others.
Like imitating a leader.
Right. Don't just copy someone like Gandhi's followers maybe did with external things. True awakening has to come from your own inner journey.
There's another story mentioned, the beggar and the emperor. What's the point there?
That story highlights the danger of looking outside yourself for validation or fulfillment. Relying on others, seeking their approval.
Stops you from growing yourself.
Exactly. It prevents your own potential from blooming. The text consistently points inward.
So the whole journey is really an internal one.
Absolutely. Life flows from the inside out, it emphasizes. Real change starts with being honest with yourself, understanding your own inner world, which is often the hardest first step.
And it's clear about where not to look.
Don't look for validation from others, it says. The truth, the answers, they're within you.
Okay, and finally, the deep dive talks about the importance of really experiencing life deeply. Why is that important?
The idea seems to be that intense experience can actually lead to detachment, paradoxically.
How?
By fully understanding something, really immersing yourself in it, its obsessive power over you can lessen. You see it for what it is.
And it brings it all back to sex again at the end.
Yes, reminding us we are born of sex. Every cell in our body is a sex cell, in a sense. The whole of creation is a sex creation. It loops back to reinforce that initial idea of sex as this fundamental creative life force.
Okay, so let's try and summarize the big takeaways from diving into from sex to samadhi. First, it reframes sex not as shameful, but as a powerful creative energy.
Right, and it highlights that deep human need for connection, with sex potentially offering a glimpse of real unity.
It definitely warns against just suppressing this energy, pointing out the potential harm and limitations of that approach.
And ultimately, it points towards the possibility of real spiritual transformation through, understanding and honest self-exploration, not denial.
And for you, the learner, we hope this dive gave you those valuable insights, those aha moments, without feeling too dense or overwhelming.
We really aimed for clarity alongside the depth.
So, here's a final thought to leave you with, something provocative maybe. What if you started viewing your deepest desires not as things to be crushed or ignored, but maybe as signposts, pointers towards a deeper connection with yourself and maybe even the universe?
Interesting question.
What might happen if you met those energies with curiosity, with a desire to understand instead of the usual fear or judgment? As the text suggests, perhaps this is just the start of exploring that.